How's it going, Mets fans? It's Wardy here, and I'm accompanied by SNY's Joe DeMeo, good buddy on the platform, as we're going to break down and live react to the news that, yes, the Mets are acquiring the number one ranked prospect in this IFA period, not named Roki Sasaki, that being in the shortstop, Elian Peña. We're going to deep dive a bit on Peña. What is there to know about his game, everybody? But let me see your initial reactions in the comments down below the news that the Mets are, in fact, landing the guy that they've been connected to, Joe, for pretty much right around a year now. I go back to, March, April, May of last year when you were making your initial pieces that the Mets were expected to land Peña. And I'm really excited to get into this because while it stains not landing Roki Sasaki, it stains a bit less when you land a talent to the caliber of Elian Peña. So, Joe, first and foremost, how you doing? Thank you so much for taking the time this evening, and let's get right into it with Elian.
I'm doing good, Wardy. Appreciate you having me. When you think about where the Mets have historically operated in the international free agent market, they've never gone to the top level of the market. Like
Right.
Giovanni Rodriguez got the biggest signing bonus ever at $2.85 million. Peña signing for approximately $5 million. So quite a big disparity there. And as far as I've been covering things, the Mets have never gone after who is considered to be the top international free agent. Of course, once Roki Sasaki was posted, he took that top spot. But other than Sasaki, Peña is the top guy. And the reason for that is he is the best combination of hit and power in the class. I'll learn more about him as he really enters the Mets system and starts getting into the flow of things as a professional. Baseball America dropped a comparison to potentially a Rafael Devers type of hitter down the road. He's not, your prototypical big time up the middle athlete. He's a shortstop now. I think he'll probably project as a third baseman long term. He has a strong throwing arm, but this is truly an opportunity where the Mets can get a guy that can quickly become one of, maybe the top 100 prospects in the sport.
So, if you had to say in simple terms, what has helped separate someone like Peña from others in his class, right? Because when we think of the biggest signings in recent years that the Mets have made in the IFA pool, I think of Francisco Alvarez right away, how significant of a deal that was at the time. If I'm not mistaken, that was the biggest signing they had done to that point there in the IFA pool. Then we see even, to a certain degree, the Juan Simones of a couple of years ago, and now the Giovanni Rodriguez's that you just alluded to. So, what about Peña? As we know, a lot of these more heralded prospects each year are typically shortstops because of their five-tool potential. So pairing that along with anything else, what would you say has really helped differentiate himself from some other kids in this class?
Yeah, when you look at international prospects, they're typically either catchers, shortstops, center fielders, or pitchers. This is, 16, 17-year-old kids that are the best athletes at their complexes or wherever they're training. So they're playing the premium up the middle positions. Where Peña really separates is he has a mature approach at the plate. He has a good knowledge of the strike zone, advanced for his age. And then you combine that with, MLB Pipeline, for example, put a 65 on his pure hit tool, which is a well above average number. And he has the chance to grow into, a 60 type of power guy, which it could be long term. We're years away and there's so many things that can transpire. But if we want to live in the world where this works out the way the Mets think and hope it can, it could be a 25 to 30 home run third base type of player.
So that power potential is what sticks out right away, especially the Mets are able to get that in-house, similarly to what they have now, thankfully, have gotten from guys like Mark Vientos, for example, an in-house talent. Not an IFA signing, but still one of significance that has finally blossomed for them. And when we look at Peña and we look at his career projection, I know that he's one of these guys that honestly may hit the bigs as soon as, again, 19, 20, 21 years of age, given how mature he's been so far in his young career there. So when we look at how Peña has really paved the way for himself for the Mets, what about this has felt like such a slam dunk fit, and how did the Mets set themselves up to find themselves in this opportunity to land Peña versus everyone else? Like, if you could kind of explain it for dummies like myself, and really how the structure goes each year with who gets the rights, who gets the opportunity to sign this player versus that, because as we'll transition shortly into how Roki Sasaki impacted things, we saw how his market impacted the Dodgers, who they would and wouldn't sign. So I'm just curious as to what has really led the Mets to be able to set themselves up where they had the best opportunity to land Peña versus the teams that have been signing the top IFA guys of years past.
At times, these things are years in the making, and whether that's right or wrong, That's kind of a morality question that I
Right.
can't answer, but that's kind of just the way the
Scouting
market
kid
works,
starting
the way it
12, a
is.
little sus. I get
Yeah,
it.
a little bit, but this is something where the Mets have been on Peña from a young age, and of course he's still young, but a younger than young age. And they have trainers there, and they train at different academies, and they get tryouts, and they get in front of scouts, and teams just kind of go to them and try to get verbal agreements. And the Mets were able to get a verbal agreement with Peña at some point, probably in the last couple of years. And those things tend to see themselves through unless something transpires, whether that's age falsification has happened before, obviously.
Yep.
But generally, it's not so much a bidding war like regular free agents where the Mets are like, we want you for this. And then he could just keep going up and up until it's signing time. They typically will agree ahead of time, where these teams plan out their classes a couple of years in advance. So the Mets just got their hands on Peña at a young age, and now they're very excited to be able to bring him into the fold.
Yeah, and seeing the Mets that they're all set up to get Peña makes it all the more exciting after the fallout of the Roki Sasaki sweepstakes. Now, we all kind of inevitably knew from the start that Sasaki would probably prefer to either be with the Dodgers or the Padres in that Yu Darvish connection. And before I ask you on how Sasaki immediately impacted this market in such a unique way, because you emphasized how teams have had commitments for, say, one, if not multiple years with players. And then when you have a circumstance like Sasaki come about, it's so unique and so in a class of his own that completely throws a wrench in a lot of teams' initial evaluation, how they're going about their IFA signing period. So the final question I have for you on Peña in particular, and this is again for the dummies, especially the fans out there that every single year, Joe, even though I feel like I've asked you this question numerous times and you've answered numerous times, I'm going to ask it again. Why should fans not care about the fact that they are signing a 16-year-old shortstop when we have Francisco Lindor at the shortstop position?
Again, as I said just a minute ago, for those listening, these kids are all shortstops, outfielders, catchers, and pitchers. That is exclusively what they are at that age. And you're just trying to accrue the most talent that you can when you're signing these players at 16. In Peña's case, he just turned 17 in October, I believe. So 17-year-old kid, you're not so much worried about what his long-term position is. You have like a vision, but you just want to get as much talent as you can into the system, and it'll work itself out over time. We don't know what Peña is necessarily going to become, but if you just take these shots at these highly talented kids, you're going to strike gold sometimes and you're going to miss horribly sometimes. Like, we could come back on this show in a couple of years and Elian Peña will be, one of the top prospects in the sport. It'll be like, hey, Joe, remember when we did that show making a big deal about Elian Peña? So you never know, but just get as much talent as you can. Don't worry about the position, and it'll all shake itself out over time.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to preach to the choir for all fans, because naturally we have the fan reaction of like, this doesn't make any sense for the immediate impact of the club. I'm like, that's true, because this isn't supposed to immediately impact the club the way that Roki Sasaki certainly would have. So as a quick, transition into Sasaki for a second, just to expand on this, because it's really fascinating to me to see how not only how his signing period window went with that 40-day period or so, but ultimately how we saw teams like the Dodgers, obviously out of all clubs, saying, hey, we're going to decommit to you. We would love to sign you a year later, but if you sign somewhere else, okay. We saw the Pirates pick up one of the key signings that the Dodgers were initially having planned on pretty much almost double the initial amount, going from like $1 million to $1.8 million. And we've seen some other transactions of similar value happen for teams that have been all involved in Sasaki and really have been kind of caught off guard with his sweepstakes. So given the fact that this is the first time I feel like both you and I have experienced this, not only as fans, but people in the baseball space, what are your thoughts on Sasaki, his immediate impact he has in the pool like this, and what it could potentially set up for years going forward should we have another unique situation from a pitcher from the MPB, KBO, what have you, that's young, controllable, and can't sign in the typical free agent period like we have for Pete Alonso, Sean Manaea, etc.?
It's a very unique case that I don't think is going to pop up all too frequently. Like, the last time this happened was Shohei Ohtani.
Right.
And now Shohei is obviously long into his career and he got that massive deal from the Dodgers. I think this is very unique and something that I wouldn't spend too much time thinking about the next one. But the reality is, when you have a pitcher with the talent that Roki Sasaki has, that gets to the level of the general managers, the president of baseball operations, the top of the chain, that all due respect to the international scouting department and all the work that they put in. If Roki Sasaki called the Mets and said, I want to be a Met, it'll cost you your whole bonus pool, the Met, David Stearns or someone would call the international scouting department and go, I'm really sorry to tell you, you can't have Elian Peña. Like that just would have been it.
Right.
And it's a unique situation where teams like the Dodgers and the Padres, as you mentioned, are a couple teams that either let guys go or said you're free to speak to other teams, or hey, if you don't mind waiting till next year, we'll sign you then. It's a very interesting time that I think disrupts a lot of stuff within the confines of the international market, but it's ultimately a 1 to 2 year thing that it really kind of screws it up. And it frankly only screws it up for the team that ends up with Roki Sasaki. And I guess if you get Roki Sasaki, didn't really screw anything up for you, you're pretty happy.
Right. If anything, it just makes you a lot happier heading into the 2025 season than not. I think
Yep.
most would agree with that common consensus. So, okay. So when we look at now Peña being a part of this Mets farm, and thankfully, not only what Billy Epler did to a degree, but also this past year in David Stearns, they've really helped build this farm into a sustainability where the Mets can give up some prospects should they wish in the trade that makes the most sense for them, whether that's something before the season begins or something during the regular season leading up to the deadline itself. The Mets are in a much better position with their prospects and with the depth of their farm than they were 4 years ago when Steve Cohen became owner. So as we look at not only the depth and quality the Mets have, where would you roughly have Elian Peña and say the Mets top 10 or top 20? And where does he find himself maybe in comparison or contrast to some of the other top free agents that we have in the mix right now? Not free agents, prospects. I apologize.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a little time to really decide where I'm putting him, but it has entered my mind. He is going to be in the top 10. I can tell you that much for sure.
There you go.
How high in the top 10? I'm still kind of hemming and hawing a little bit. I got a little time before I need to make a new list, which you could see my most recent one. It's pinned to my Twitter profile at PSL The Flushing, or you could see it at sny.tv. But I will tell you this, Elian Peña is going to quickly be one of the highest ranked prospects in Mets system, and it'll be the highest I've ever ranked an international free agent, quote unquote, immediately after signing. So really excited to be able to have him in the fold and to be able to cover him as I move forward and follow this farm system as I do day in and day out.
I think there's something to make note of just how high you're willing to have him right away when it's not like the Mets have an abundance of a weak farm, if you will. Like, yes, we have had guys that blossomed over the past 2 years that have lost their prospect status, if you will, because they have been fringe MLB players that have had some up and down time, like Brett Beatty, for example, or now who's blossomed Mark Vientos. But when we look at Francisco Alvarez, when we look at Giovanni Rodriguez, if you can remember, and if you don't entirely, it's completely fine. I'm just asking right off the riff right now, where you had them ranked when they were first signing with the Mets, how drastically different do you think it'll be from someone like Peña?
So I think I had Giovanni somewhere around 20, late teen.
Okay.
Like that. Alvarez, I think at that time I was only ranking the top 10. So I didn't really put that all together, but I would guess somewhere in that same vicinity.
Right.
And Peña is obviously a significant difference because he's, like I said, he'll make my top 10. It's just a matter of where exactly. I have to really kind of go player by player and see how high I want to put him.
Would you say that the Baseball America comparison on a Rafi Devers type, based on just the current build, especially batting from the left side, how he goes about his swing, do you see those similar characteristics, or are there any other players, in your opinion, whether they are current or former Mets or just people around the game, that you think you could actually see a little bit more of a side-by-side? And I like to preface, I'm not saying that he needs to be Rafi Devers, that he will be Rafi Devers or anything like that, just based on how they're kind of profiling at the young age of 17.
Yeah, I'm generally not a huge comp guy, so I don't really go around just dropping players' names because I think that sets expectations for the player, expectations for the fan.
Right.
And like if I said Rafael Devers and he ends up instead just being like an above average big league player, that'll be a disappointment in the eyes of people.
That's true.
I try to avoid comps in general, but if you watch him swing the bat, you could see why the Mets are giving this guy a $5 million bonus.
Right.
It is such easy power. It looks like he's not even trying. on my Twitter, I posted a video that Baseball America had of him taking some BP,
I'm
and it
running
looks
one
like
as we speak. It's probably the
oh,
same one. There you go.
perfect. Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's just taking simple batting practice to just spray some line drives, and the balls are going over the fence. So
Right.
it's pretty unique, special stuff. And Baseball America is as good as anybody at this stuff. So if they say Rafael Devers is a high end possible outcome for him, then I'll ride with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely down for it as well. I think when you look at the future of the farm for the Mets, I naturally anticipate there to be some significant changes over the next couple of years. Not that I want us to trade the farm or anything like that, but Joe, even as one who's as heavy of a pro prospect guy as you are that covers them for a living all year through SNY, there's always a deal that's worthwhile, especially if it's
Mhm.
young, controllable, can give you some long term. That's why a guy like Garrett Crochet was very appealing to the Mets. I'm sure, to a degree yourself certainly was to me
Yeah.
before he landed there with the Boston Red Sox. So while the Mets continue to churn out this farm and make changes, it appears greatly that Peña is just going to blossom and hopefully have himself a great first year there in the pros. Because we've seen some players in recent years that the Mets have signed that had an immediate impact as soon as they started playing at Port St. Lucie, and others that really, kind of need to get their feet wet and get themselves going. And one that comes to mind right away is not someone that's in the IFA pool, but more so of just a top former draft pick, that being in Colin Houck. I know that he's had
Mhm.
his fair share of struggles and, his highs and lows since getting adjusted at the professional level. So it's just going to be interesting to see in comparison to someone like himself that had further experience to lead to now the pro level versus someone like Peña at his age of 17, just how much he kind of separates himself from the rest and how quickly he does that. I'm really looking forward to it. But Joe, again, thank you so much for coming on with this great breakdown on Elian Peña. We appreciate it. Feels nice to talk about it, Elian, that the Mets are signing and not the Elian Soto that I think he probably would have liked to in hindsight a couple years ago. Fast forwarding a couple years later, now that Juan's on the team. But before I let you out here, Joe, can you please let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
Yes, thank you, Wardy. Appreciate having me join you as always.
Of course.
Twitter, X, whatever. I'm calling it Twitter forever, so someone should try and stop me. At PSL the Flushing is my handle. You could check me out on the Mets Pod. I'm the co-host with Connor Rogers. That is a weekly podcast, and whenever else something happens that requires us to come back on the show. And you can read my work at sny.tv. And yeah, that about covers it. So again, appreciate you having me as always, and excited to be back again soon talking about the next wave of Mets prospects.
Yes, next time we'll have you on. I'd imagine it probably wouldn't be too long, maybe after your latest ranking list. Maybe we could bring you
Yeah.
on and deep dive that a little bit on what's changed versus the previous one, especially with Peña in the fold. So appreciate you, Joe. Thank you again. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know your biggest takeaway in the comments down below that the Mets have officially signed Elian Peña there to that $5 million bonus, the biggest in franchise history. We'll see what's next for the Mets this offseason. Until then, have a great one, guys. Peace out.